Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's tech showcase for Microsoft Lync. My name is Chris Sheridan. I'm a solutions architect here at New Signature. I specialize in unified communications and collaboration. And today we're going to step through Lync 2013, some of the announcements from the Lync Con that happened back a few weeks ago, as well as stepping through some of the upgrades, migrations, and different aspects and back-end features of Microsoft Lync. Again, today's going to be focused a lot on the back-end server infrastructure and not as much on the client and front-end user interface. We will talk about it a little bit and maybe some of the things are different. We're going to focus a lot on the back-end, on the media flow, and what's new in 2013, sort of on that end, and where we're going coming into the new versions due out later this year, early next year. So, Microsoft Lync 2013, what is it? We'll just do that quick high-level step. It is Microsoft's real-time communication and collaboration standpoint. So when you look at it from a 10,000-foot view, there's really three parts of what Microsoft calls unified communications and collaboration. The first is synchronous communication, right? Real-time, voice, video, IM, presence. These are the features and functions that all sit within Lync. Then there's asynchronous communication, or person to machine. That is exchange, where we have voicemail, faxing, email. Person to box. The third component of it is what we're actually collaborating on. I don't call people for just the sake of calling them, and I don't send them emails just to say hi, right? I'm asking them to do something. We're collaborating on documents, people, processes, whatever it is. That's SharePoint. Right, our content management and our collaboration space. So when you put the three together, that's Microsoft Unified Communications and Collaboration. So there is a gray line, and it helps to delineate understanding synchronous versus asynchronous communication. Because all synchronous communication sits in the Lync, we have to be much more careful about how we architect it and what we do with it, because it has a greater difference. Example, a 200 millisecond latency on an email is imperceptible to the user community. They're not going to notice that the email got to them 1 second later than it might have. Whereas in voice or video or real-time communication, that 200 millisecond latency can be disastrous and cause a really poor experience. So we really need to simplify that architecture, get it so that it can be as robust and as able to withstand fault as possible. So when we look at 2013, again, we're looking at that architecture and how it works. We're looking at how it's leveraging the other parts of the Microsoft suite. And as soon as we introduce voice, and I would argue for most organizations, instant messaging is not what we would call mission critical. Some organizations might feel it is, but I would say the vast majority say IM is not mission critical. Voice and video, however, are. And that's where it becomes very important for us to make sure we have that distinction and we have that robustness and reliability that we're expecting. The other thing we need to do is provide options within your organization, right? There are three distinct ways to really deploy Lync and deploy it correctly. So when we look at these moving forward, these are, as we go through the webinar today, we're going to look at the different methodologies for deploying Lync and when they're appropriate. If you have questions as I go through this today, feel free to put them in the IM window on the side. I will address them as I can, as they're coming in, or either if I know it's coming up in a later slide, I may hold off until I know it's coming up in the presentation. But feel free to put them in the IM window there. So Lync Server 2013, again, enterprise voice, video, audio, web conferencing, mobile, and persistent chat. So these are the different features we're going to talk about and how they're architected today. The biggest thing, because I still run into people who maybe aren't aware, Lync is an enterprise telephony system. It is an enterprise class PBX, competing head-to-head with Cisco, Avaya, ShoreTel, Mitel. Right? It is an enterprise class telephony system with customers as large as 100,000 seats sitting on it. Microsoft itself runs Lync as their phone system. Large organizations like Sprint at 66,000 seats, or AT&T. all the way down to smaller customers, running maybe several hundred seats, right? The key is, if you are large enough that you are entertaining buying a traditional PBX, Lync should be an option as well. So again, we'll go through all of those different workloads. The key here, and some of the big changes for 2013, are the scalability and the design, and some of the things we've done to simplify that scalability, that failover, as well as virtualization within the system we're going to step through. The big key here when we talk about efficiency, this particular box is talking about efficiency on the back end and compliance. I think the real selling point of Lync is the efficiency for the user. It's part of the Office suite. It's integrated to the rest of the applications. There are two fundamental philosophies. I get asked often to compare Cisco to Lync or Avaya to Lync. Cisco in particular being sort of maybe the big dog in the PBX world. When I do my comparisons, Cisco builds their systems from the back end forward. They start in the server room and then they build forward towards the desktop. Microsoft starts at the desktop and works its way back to the server room. Now you can argue which is a better philosophy, but that's ultimately the key difference between the two. Microsoft builds it from a user experience and an integration into the rest of their applications back. So Lync's integration into SharePoint or Outlook, that's really that efficiency. I very rarely use the Lync client itself. Instead, I am using, I'm in Outlook or I'm in emails and I'm doing those replies and that connected experience through the other applications I live in. And then we talk about, and this is some of the really cool new stuff from Lync Conference, and we talk about that federation, that connection to Skype and to the outside world, and how we're moving forward there. So when we talk about an integrated system, again, there are three ways to deploy Lync. The first is simply for IM and presence, right? We're going to install it. We're not looking at any voice or video features. We're simply looking for a corporate IM client. Simple, small, easy to manage. The second level is what we call enhanced, or the enhanced mode, where we're actually enhancing an existing PBX implementation. I often joke with my clients, if I walked in and told you your baby was ugly, you would throw me out the door. Well, the same goes in IT. As a consultant, when I walk in, I can't walk in and tell you your $1 million investment in your existing PBX system is bad, because you'd walk me out the door. You have an investment in that and you have an ROI. So one of the beauties of Lync is that it can enhance that existing investment you already have. By connecting Lync to your existing phone system, we're just augmenting the functionality of it. Once that PBX is end-of-life and your ROI has been realized and you are ready for that new system, that's where Lync can take that final step up into enterprise-class PBX. And we can look at Lync for all of our workloads, not just some. And the beauty of that enhanced to enterprise voice deployment methodology is a lot of people, when they're doing their PBX migration, it's a rip and replace, it's over a weekend or over a short period of time, very fast and very expensive. With Lync, we can do the integration and we can migrate your users onto an enterprise telephony platform over a 6-day period, a 6-week period, or a 6-year period. It doesn't matter at the end of the day, the speed at which you want to move. That enhanced methodology is going to allow us to connect the two environments and migrate user by user or department by department. I had a university client here in the New England area where they had done an RFP and they wanted to migrate, and again they were trying to cram it all into this budget year and they were trying to figure out how to make it work. And what we actually did by doing Lync, we connected Lync to their existing system, and we were able to spread the cost over 2 fiscal years, which actually helped them. So they bought the endpoints for the first half of their migration in 1 fiscal year, and then in the other fiscal year bought the other half of the endpoints, able to spread out the cost and make it much more palatable to their finance group and their budget. So just that simple stretching out of the deployment made their life easier. It had nothing to do with usability per se, but had to do with that deployment methodology and how we move forward. So the first workload we'll talk about is video conferencing. So Lync is an AVMCU for our video conference calls. It does RTV and RTA. So RTA and RTV are Microsoft's codecs for voice and video. They are very robust, take a lot of abuse, and handle a good majority of the calls. But we also have H.264 SVC that we can do across our AVMCU. We can integrate this with traditional H.323 based room systems such as Polycom's HDX units or group series units. We can integrate directly to those by creating an Active Directory user object for them and dragging in the call. In that scenario, it simply makes the HDX unit a very nice camera and video unit for Lync. We also have the ability to dial into, say, the VMR methodology of Polycom or other providers where we can connect in to those traditional room-based systems. So again, we swapped from 2010 to 2013 now from active speaker cam. So in the previous releases, we did active speaker cam. So we were looking at one person at a time, but it was only the most active speaker. Now we do the gallery view. We'll see up to 5 video streams at a time, and it will be those people who have been the 5 most recent speakers. I do have the capability of pinning one of these users and keeping their video stream up. I need to see, Armando's video because I'm concerned about how he's going to receive this news. I could pin him and keep his video stream up and let the other ones be. It's a user-to-user preference. By limiting it to 5 video streams, we're also able to control the amount of bandwidth we're going to use, because we can control that the number of streams at any time that each machine is going to receive. I don't care how many people are in the call. So we can cap that video bandwidth usage. By policy, we can also control what level of video each user is capable of doing, right? Are they going to do, 720p at 30 frames per second, or are we going to reduce them to SIF quality video, right? And you'll find mostly Lync, we're doing headshot-based photos in this scenario, right? That talking head, the 2-foot radius sort of around my head. In that case, 1080p at 30 frames per second is a bit overkill unless you really want to see if I have acne. More likely than not, all you're going to need is that SIF quality video. Where we need to step up in our video quality is when we go to a room-based system and we're looking to get 5, 10, 15 people at a conference table showing up through our video stream. So traditionally we would go to a 323 based system like Polycom and bring in those. Microsoft launched at the end of last year, however, Lync Room Systems, or LRS. So Lync Room Systems are now available. They're made by Crestron, Polycom, and Smart. And they are Microsoft's foray into this room-based system. Now the benefit of LRS is that you don't need an expensive bridge in the back end. It's going to run off of your existing Lync infrastructure. So you're saving yourself quite a bit of money by not needing to deploy an expensive centralized bridge. You already have it up and running with your Lync implementation. The downside is in V1, our cameras are fixed point digital zoom cameras right now. And the product team is working feverishly on getting some of the optical zoom swivel cameras, something like an Eagle Eye Director or other high-end camera, to be certified for Lync, so that way we can get to a higher end based camera. So if you've got a conference room of 5 to 10 people, a Lync room system works just fine. If you've got an auditorium style room of 20 or 30 people and you need multiple point cameras that can cover the whole room, that's where the traditional room systems still have it over an LRS based system. So again, depends on the use case and depending on what you're looking at, how we might want to connect in, but understand there are options available. Again, any questions on anything I just mentioned or talk about, feel free to put them in the IM window. So now, video conferencing is a big workload we talk about. Another one is web conferencing, right? And when we do Lync implementations, a lot of times when I'm consulting, one of the first things the CFO or CEO wants to know about is, what's our ROI? What's our return on investment on this system? Where are we going to save money with Lync? And a lot of CFOs and CIOs understand soft costs and productivity gain and client, employee satisfaction and the ability to get work out the door, but a lot of those are factored into soft costs. One of the hard costs we deal with is displacing expensive conferencing services, such as GoToMeeting or WebEx. There are organizations who spend tens of thousands, some hundreds of thousands of dollars in a month on these types of services. And when you look at the profile of most web conferences are 5 people at most, usually internal only. 70% of yours are going to be internal only, and those that are external are going to be, either half and half or majority internal employees. So it's very rare that you have multiple external coming to one internal in most organizations, or it's a minority of the calls. So think about taking all of those calls that you can, that 50 to 70% of those calls, and moving them to an internal service. I'm very careful when I go inside to organizations and saying I'm going to 100% displace an intercall service or a WebEx service that is hosted, because there are those use cases where they exist. In fact, Microsoft has a hosted Lync option that you can use to host your Lync call on their service for just those large calls, right? Maybe your infrastructure can't handle 1,000 people dialing in at once, so we need to host that all-hands-on meeting call externally because your internal infrastructure isn't capable of handling it. So again, I'm very careful to say we're not going to replace 100%, but we are going to replace a good amount of it. So when we talk about the architecture, what you're looking at here is, in the example on the right, we have an enterprise pool with our backend SQL database. We have our edge services. So edge services sit in your DMZ. They allow external participants to connect into your meeting through a web browser, like most of you are probably doing today. There is also a web applications server role. Now this replaces, in the old version, we had the monitoring server role, which existed in 2010, which monitored the quality of a call and gave us all sorts of reporting. We'll talk about that a little later. That's actually become consolidated now into the enterprise servers. So the WAC server role has replaced it. So it's not a net new server in the architecture in count of numbers service, it's just different. So this PowerPoint here today, I'm not actually sharing out my desktop. I've uploaded this PowerPoint to the web application server, and the web application server is allowing me to share out the PowerPoint and do things like annotation. Oh, I skipped ahead there. Go back to web conferencing. And allow me to do things like annotation. I can take a pen and I can change its color here, and then I can say, see, we're talking about this right here. And we're not talking about, I'll change color, I'll do green, these are the enterprise servers right here. So again, all of this annotation and sharing I now have as part of that web application server. That WAC server is also used by SharePoint. And there's actually an architecture here. We're showing that web application server deployed inside of the DMZ, and in this case, that web application server would be wholly dedicated to Lync. There is actually a deployment methodology, where we deploy the web application server into the DMZ, and therefore SharePoint and Lync can both use it at the same time. So it's a really great server role that lets us, if I were to say all of a sudden get disconnected, I'm working from home, I all of a sudden lose connectivity for some reason, I'm able to, the PowerPoint won't go away because it's not my desktop sharing it. One of my colleagues could pick up and continue the call. So again, we're using that web application server as that central point for sharing it out, as opposed to it coming from my desktop. So now mobility. So this is a big part of Lync, and one of the big advantages of Lync. When we talk about it in a deployment, more and more people are mobile. I mean, I work from home. I am very rarely in a corporate office. My laptop is a non-domain joined machine. It is completely separate from the network. I have my 2 Surface tablets. I have an RT and a Pro. I have my iPad. I have my mobile devices. Typical IT person, I've got way too many gadgets and toys. How do I connect all this together? How do I work seamlessly like I'm in the office with everybody else? And this is where that mobility piece comes in. So through the edge services, we're able to connect remote users on their desktop or laptop. We're able to connect remote phones. We're able to connect any type of mobile devices: Android, iPad, iPhone, Windows Mobile, Surface. There's clients for everything. And we get that one user experience across all platforms. So regardless of your location. And that's really the benefit of instant messaging and presence, that ability to connect with your peers when they're available, and extending that service beyond the borders of the office. So working from home, I happen to have just a Polycom CX600 phone on my desk here, and this phone is simply going back through the edge server and connecting back into my Lync environment through those same edge services. So again, understanding that mobility, understanding how we're connecting in different devices is really key. We can also do an XMPP gateway, not shown in the diagram here, but there is the capability of doing an XMPP gateway if there are other instant messaging services that don't normally federate with Lync and you need to connect them in. Google Talk is an example, though Google is not a big fan of that, and I believe they're not supporting it any longer. Services like that can be connected back in through an XMPP gateway. And again, the way the mobile clients are designed too, there's been a lot of energy and effort put into them, so they now can do content sharing. You can do video from the iPad. You can connect in, and they're optimized for battery life and how we're sending that data over. We can do VoIP calls from the wireless networks or through Wi-Fi on the device with the 2013 client now. So in 2010, the mobile clients, when you initiated a phone call from Lync, it was pure ringback, where the Lync server would then call you, you would answer, and then it would make the outbound call. Great advantage in that you always appear as if you're calling from the office. Lync 2013 will take it a step further and actually do a VoIP-based call, bypassing your cellular minutes and using data. It's a blessing and a curse to this. When this first started coming out, most wireless carriers still had forms of unlimited data use. We've all seen over the past few years that that has been reduced, so the benefit of this is somewhat lessened in that people may be more preferable to use their minutes as opposed to using their wireless network connection. So the next feature we'll talk about is persistent chat. So if any of you are old enough, like me, to have enjoyed the good old days of BBSs and our old pre-internet days of how we communicated, a persistent chat room is just that. It's a stream of consciousness. It's an always-on room that people can connect into and just share thoughts and information. Great for teams or for collaboration. So in 2013, one of the big improvements we've made, now this has existed for a while, but in previous versions it required a separate desktop client in order to access those rooms. Didn't make it very practical because we're trying to eliminate the number of applications a user has to have open at any given time, not increase them. So it wasn't widely used. We fixed that in 2013, and it's now one client, the same Lync client you use for your IM voice and video, connects to your persistent chat rooms. It is a separate pool of servers and a separate SQL database for persistent chat. So it does increase the back-end footprint, but it does keep it completely separate from the rest of your instant messaging world and the rest of your connectivity. You can still archive and do all your security and control. Okay, you can get up to 80,000 endpoints per room, okay, and again connects with that same client. The administration is done from the same console you administer everything else through. You get that same remote connectivity to it as well through the same edge services. So no, it's not radically different. It really is simply going to Topology Builder, picking which servers you want to be your persistent chat server roles, and setting up your SQL mirror, and you're good to go for persistent chat. A lot of people ask, what's the difference between this and, say, a wiki or a blog or a SharePoint news feed? And the ultimate answer is nothing. There really is no difference. It's different mediums. If I were, example inside of my organization, guess which side the SharePoint team uses inside my organization, and guess which side the Lync team prefers inside my organization, right? It's just what you're comfortable with and what that individual team is comfortable using. So now when we talk about maintenance and we look at some of the back-end changes, and we're talking about reduced maintenance and reduced footprint and being flexible to your organization, there's a couple of key things to look at, right? So when we talk about, that simplistic, IAM and presence only, all we need is that single standard edition server. It'll run its own SQL Express. You get your IAM voice and video peer-to-peer inside your network. You can add the edge server to this type of architecture if you wanted to, right? You get a very small footprint, but this footprint is going to allow you to get up and running pretty straightforward. Now, the issue with standard edition is it doesn't scale very high, right? So for a smaller or mid-sized organization, this is a very simple way of getting Lync stood up, getting it off and going, and starting to use it. However, if you do want to scale it, or if you were ever going to move into enterprise telephony, you might have to replace this architecture down the road. Pardon me, a little dry spot in my throat there. So now we talk about scaling it, and this is really where Lync starts to turn. Now we can scale that enterprise pool, and we can do multiple servers into that enterprise pool. You can scale it up to 20 servers per pool with 200,000 active users per pool, right? Now, no single organization is going to do this, and I hope Microsoft doesn't continue to scale this up, because this is sort of now at that ludicrous speed, if you've ever seen Spaceballs, level, right? We've now hit that point where no organization of that size is going to have a single pool this large, because if you have that many users, you're in multiple countries, multiple locations, and for high availability and for local regional control, we're probably going to end up doing multiple pools anyway. But understand, it scales as high as you want. We can provision them, simply add another server into the enterprise pool later on. So if you started with a 3-server pool and all of a sudden found yourself after 12 months needing a 4th server, it is about a 2-hour process, total build time, to get that thing up and running, tested, and part of the pool. It is a very, very short end project to get that scaled up. So again, that enterprise pool scales up. No other, all the functionality is in there. When we do talk about an enterprise pool, we generally recommend, in the Microsoft best practices, say 3 servers at a minimum. There's a whole bunch of different reasons, but the primary one I usually cite is when we're talking about failover and manageability, if you have a 3-server pool and you are doing maintenance on one server for some reason and a second one blows up, your environment's not down, right? And again, when we start talking about voice and video, this is when we start moving towards the enterprise pool as a minimum. People will live without IAM for a period of time and not lose their minds. Voice and video, not so much. So that's where we really start looking at the enterprise pool. And we also start looking at that SQL backend and doing that always on SQL, right? A SQL witness with a mirror, so that we have that high availability on the backend database as well as the front end servers. So now when we start talking about the flexibility and high capacity in each region, we start looking at distributing those. So again, we have a primary site and an secondary site here going through multiple data centers. So we can have that complete failover, whether it be, you can see here, we have a European office with PSTN connectivity, an America's PSTN connectivity. If you're on a global MPLS, your MPLS provider, who's providing you your SIP services, can fail over your DIDs very easily through your MPLS cloud. If you're dealing with PRIs, it gets a little more difficult because you're inbound. You can't fail over, but we can still do things, and there's a lot of flexibility to do least cost routing, to do some different capacity planning, as well as to do local PRIs or SIP trunks or POTS lines even for emergency calls. So if we took, say, an example of a 3-site organization, 2 primary sites with 40% of the users each, and then a small site with a handful of users. So the 2 primary sites, we would probably have an enterprise pool at each site with a SIP trunk coming in. Hopefully they're connected by MPLS, but if it's site-to-site VPN, that's fine as well. And we'll connect them through the internet, and we can have some failover capability, and we can have some least cost routing going on. And at that remote site, we can put something like an SBA, or Survivable Branch Appliance, where we could drop another PRI or SIP trunk or POTS lines into it so that that particular site would at least retain the ability for outbound calls, if nothing else. If that 3rd site with the SBA was in fact a different region, I could do their DIDs coming in through that Survivable Branch Appliance through whatever connection was coming in. However, because it's not an enterprise pool, I now don't have failover capability from there because it's just an SBA. So there's some different ways you can architect this. It's very similar to most PBXs on the market with the different appliances they have. There's all of that same architecture and thought process that we have to put in. The key is the system is super flexible. We can meet whatever your particular requirements are for your organization, regardless of the number of sites and where your users are. We can work with you through a planning engagement to make sure you understand where servers should go, what your best bet is, what your phase 0 through phase 5 might be through your migration. So again, when we talk about that footprint, again, we've tried to reduce it down, and everything can be virtualized now. I think that's the biggest key. That started late in the 2010 era. Everything can be virtualized, so there is no need to run anything on a physical server. That said, if you do run it on a physical server, the capacity planning for how many users are supported per server does go up. Because the thing we worry about with Lync and virtualization is resources, right? We never want Lync fighting for resources. We want Lync to have at its disposal what it needs. So when we virtualize it, we do dedicate processors and RAM to it. Because if Lync had to fight for processors or I/O time, it could cause latency in the information getting out. And latency in voice and video is not good. So again, we can virtualize everything. We can consolidate everything on our front-end servers. And we can have that nice back-end capability. That monitoring server role is actually now co-located on the front-end server. Understand voicemail, and you can see here in sort of the architecture of what a typical deployment may look like, that voicemail server, or UM server, is an exchange function. It is not a Lync server role. Every once in a while I'll run into a client who is running Lotus Notes, and they want to utilize Lync as their phone system, and what that entails is finding a third-party voicemail system, because Lync does not have its own voicemail. Again, asynchronous communication goes to Exchange, not to Lync. We will have that WAC server role. You may look at System Center from a management or manageability standpoint. We might want to deploy System Center to help us monitor the environment. So the Lync monitoring server role has lots of great tools and everything you would need to manage the environment. SCOM, or System Center Operations Manager, takes it to another level. And so if you are a System Center customer today, SCOM has the management packs of taking that reporting and that next level of Lync management and automation. And again, understanding that DMZ role is very important, and our federation to the outside world. So now we're talking about Lync being mission critical, and how does that failover work and virtualization. So again, it goes back to what we talked about a few slides ago when we talk about that that Lync 2010 front-end pool with 8 servers capped off and a tightly coupled back end, to now where we more have that SQL mirror, right? And we don't have a SQL cluster, but we're having a SQL mirror with a witness, and we can do up to 20 front-end servers in the pool. So it really lets us distribute it and scale at a different level. When we talk about security, Now we're talking about encrypting that data all the way through. So we are talking about securing the endpoints, encrypting the media, doing identity management, and again, using Active Directory. We can do multi-factor authentication because we're using Active Directory as our security challenge. We can do isolation. So at the edge server level, we can choose what we share out. I'll give you an example. So new signature, we are open federated, right? If you put in my name into your Lync client and attempt to instant message me, you will be able to do so because we are open federated at the edge. Microsoft is what's called closed federated, meaning you can federate with them, but they have to go in and manually set you at the edge server that your company and domain is allowed to connect to them. Once you do that, even their federation has limits. So their employees externally only share FreeBusy information. Lync is typically capable of showing you off hook in a conference call, a next level of detail on presence. That isn't shared outside of Microsoft. Only FreeBusy is shared. By default, Microsoft doesn't share photos outside. Photos are filtered, so their Active Directory photos do not come outside, unless that particular user moves me into their work group. So you have the ability to change someone's social status with you in your own Lync client. By default, I am an external contact to them. The minute they move me into work group, that allows their Active Directory photo to be shared with me. However, regardless of what level I am, Microsoft has disabled file sharing through IM. They don't allow file transfer through IM, period. It's just completely blocked. So again, you get that complete edge server control, and you can also do these controls internally. Are you going to let employees share files through IM or not? You know, how are you going to lock those down? So again, you have that control all the way down to IM content filtering, vulgarity, social security numbers, credit card numbers. There are filters, or what I call ethical firewalls, that can be placed on IM as well to control what content is going in and out of your instant messages. So now when we talk about that recovery or that ease of failover, right, because we have our pool, we can extend our pool across multiple sites, or we can do separate pools and have our failover. So again, you can do low-cost HA, you can do identical clusters and have complete replication between the two sites for 100% failover. You can do fast recovery across pools, right? And you could load balance your pools and say, home them here, but across my different Lync servers, I can do hardware load balancer, or I can do DNS load balancing and load balance across all of my different servers to keep things up and running. Again, server virtualization. So again, we can, everything is completely, can be virtualized from a role. Again, the biggest thing in consideration when you are virtualizing is resources. You don't want Lync fighting for resources. You do want to dedicate those resources to Lync so that it has access to them at all times. So it's not the most efficient use of virtualization, right? One of the benefits of virtualization is letting some of these servers fight for resources when they need them. But in the case of Lync, we just don't want to risk it. Best practice says you don't, because voice and video, we just can't take the risk of a poor video experience or voice experience. So we also support VDI in 2013. So we can do a complete VDI deployment through either Citrix, Zen Desktop, or any other thin client. Again, there is a plugin for audio and video redirection and USB ports, making, you know, we would have to look at your particular terminals you were using and how you are accessing them, but there is support for PC and thin clients so that we can do that VDI infrastructure. It's getting more and more popular at organizations these days. Efficient. So now we want to look at how we do modern operations. And please forgive me, evidently they're doing construction on my street, so if it's so loud that you guys are hearing it, it's distracting, let me know and I'll swap headsets real quick. You know, it wouldn't be a demo or a webinar if someone wasn't doing construction outside the office here. So, so now when we talk about efficiency, we look at that integration and that monitoring component and the compliance component. So when we talk about modern operations, it's a Windows server, right? It's PowerShell, it's Active Directory, it's all the tools you are familiar with as an organization for administering your environment. The other great part of Lync, and I hope someday that Exchange and SharePoint adopt a similar tool, is the Lync Topology Builder. So the Lync Topology Builder, if you're not familiar with it, allows you to design your Lync environment, publish that topology to your network. When you have built your topology, you've identified the names of the servers that are going to hold different roles. When you go to that server and attempt to install the bits for Lync, it will go back and search for a topology. When it finds one, it will take that topology and build that server, use the bits to build that server based on the role you've identified for it in the topology builder, including service accounts and all those other wonderful things. It's a wonderful wizard to step through to help you architect and deploy your Lync environment. It also makes it super easy to make changes to that environment down the road of adding another server or adding you know, maybe you do a single SQL server to start, but down the road you want to do a mirror with a witness, whatever it may be. You're simply able to make those changes and add things in later on. So it uses Active Directory. So all authentication is done through Active Directory. No need for separate databases if you're using other IM clients, right? We are using Active Directory. We're provisioning users through Active Directory. We're doing things like the manager field and all those other wonderful things that exist within Active Directory, pulling them in and making use of them in Lync. So again, whether or not you're on premise or in the cloud, and we'll talk a little bit more about cloud in a moment, we have this great ability to connect people together using Active Directory and managing it from one spot. So now a lot of you on the call today may be running Lync 2010 and maybe looking at that next sort of step and upgrade. And this is, again, a great feature and migration strategy for your legacy Lync environments. So let's assume today you have a Lync 2010 pool. So the first thing you do is install the servers. You build your new Lync pool. You can multiple versions in the same network, and you can set up that whole new pool. Then you can start provisioning users onto that new pool and creating things there. So question, can you get a copy of the slides when we're done? Absolutely. And I know a lot of these are, some of them may be chicken scratch or technology-based slides, so absolutely we can get you a copy of these when we're done. So now we've got that new pool built. Once we have that new pool built, most of you are not going to have a director server, so if you simply eliminate that, instead of pointing at the director server, we actually point to the edge server. So we migrate all of our Lync clients, which are today using our legacy edge server, we point those at the new edge server. Once we've pointed those at the new edge server, we can migrate everybody over. So again, we get a nice smooth cutover using edge server migration. Okay, so users get very little to no downtime using edge server migration. So monitoring, again, we have the Lync monitoring server, which is going to help us monitor our individual calls. Microsoft does something called QoE, quality of experience. It's actually monitoring the performance of the call all the way down to the endpoint itself. All Lync certified endpoints have software in them that actually report back to the Lync monitoring server on how they're performing. I've had cases where someone called me up and said, you know, gee, I just had a bad call experience, what's going on? and I check and I can see that Lync monitoring is reporting they were using a non-certified endpoint. And when I asked them, they were simply using their PC mic and speaker. And no offense to anybody who may be from Dell on the call or a company like that, but the Dell laptop integrated mics and speakers maybe aren't the greatest things in the world. They're not really designed to be a phone or a phone replacement. So how do we know that that wasn't causing the issue, or do we know that that was causing the issue? So the monitoring server is going to let us do that end-to-end system visibility. We also have the capability, again, of introducing SCOM and taking it to another level and really getting down to an advanced layer of monitoring beyond a simple score and what the quality of the call was. So for those organizations who are Microsoft shops and have System Center in place, the Lync add-in for SCOM is definitely a must, right? And in that case, now you can start monitoring all your SLAs in one place. Not just Lync, but the server itself, the network, and everything else, right? The Lync monitoring server is just not going to monitor Lync and maybe the MOS score, whereas SCOM is going to monitor everything in between. So reporting. So Lync is based on SQL, so there are built-in reports. However, and this is where maybe I'll deviate a little even from the slide, there are, if you are thinking of call center grade type reports or chargeback reports or call costing or cost codes, things like that, that is not native to Lync. Again, it's a SQL database, so if you're comfortable writing SRS reports, there really is no data you can't get out of the system and create your own reports. However, there are ISVs who have written applications, and there's 6 or 7 really good ones out there, a couple specific to the legal vertical, and then a couple more generic ones around costing and chargeback and codes and things like that. So there are some really great ISVs. And this is probably one of the biggest fundamental changes in Microsoft over the past few years when we look at their architecture and how they're designing these systems, right? It's a much more open architecture, a much more open API, and Microsoft is encouraging the community to write extensions to their applications. Within Lync, one of the coolest ones I've seen is in fact a medical application where their camera was placed in all the emergency rooms, and a doctor at any point can pull up the camera in the room through Lync, and it's tied into the patient's monitoring system, so their blood, their oxygen level, their heart rate, etc., etc. So that the doctor, when pulling up the Lync, instead of seeing content in the window like you're seeing now, the doctor will see the video of the patient, and in the content window they're getting patient information. So without having to get up from their desk, they can see what's going on with the patient if there's something, if they just want to do a quick check-in. So, and you think about that remotely, the nurses at the nursing stations can just walk over. What about the doctor when he's gone home and he wants to check in on a patient from his laptop? He has that capability. So now when we talk about compliance and that archive, right at the top here, right, we say one archive store. What we're talking about is if we're archiving instant messages, we used to do it in a separate SQL database, which from an e-discovery standpoint worked, but was more complicated. Now in 2013, we swapped and we put the archive in your Exchange mail store. Now, if for some reason you still want to put it in a separate SQL database, that's still okay. But wouldn't it be better to put it in your mail store and use your Exchange e-discovery tool to look at all IMs, all emails, and now with Exchange 2013, you can also look at all your SharePoint content. So from one e-discovery tool within Exchange, I can look at all my different mediums as part of my unified communication and do my legal searches and holds, right? We can get one compliance experience. We train our administrators through RBAC, role-based access control, how to use the Exchange e-discovery tool. We don't have to retrain them on anything for Lync. They can use that one item, that one contact store, Active Directory, or GAL, pull that in, okay? keep that one database. Again, the Microsoft story is best of suite, right? Everything working together, all the applications designed to work together. So when we look at that here, now we've got that archiving and QoE going on. We've got unified e-discovery going on through Exchange. We've got users having their IMs archived in the conversation history in their OST, right? This has worked this way for quite some time. Up here, right, we put it in the OST. But that was never really good for e-discovery because it stayed in the OST file, didn't go back up to the inbox, right? We've got that one Lync experience going across all devices. So regardless of the device I'm on, I'm getting that one look and feel. For those of you who are using Office 2013 and maybe not Lync yet, you'll notice the contact card has changed in Outlook, right? It looks exactly like a Lync contact card did in 2010 and does now in 2013, right? Again, we've created that one look and feel across all applications and devices. Make things easier for our users. Note, there is still backwards compatibility. You can still use the Lync 2010 client and connect to a 2013 server environment, but you're losing out on some of that really cool functionality. So now we start looking at connected and connecting to the outside world. So the biggest one that's new here, or the biggest leaps that have been made, is Skype. So the Skype Federation, which has been talked about for quite some time now, they showed it off at LyncCon a few weeks ago. Within the next 2 months, we will have full video connection with Skype. So we'll be able to do desktop sharing, voice, video, and IM with all Skype clients. When you think about the hundreds of millions of users of Skype, think about the reach that gives your organization. From a corporate controlled IM client, you can now connect to external parties through Skype. Again, there's still the other providers you can connect to. You still have those connectivities. If someone external does have Lync, that's great. And if they don't, then they can come in through the browser-based experience. Okay? So we really have that anywhere reach, that ability to connect with everybody in the world and bring them into my organization when it suits me. If you think about HR, doing remote interviews, right? All of these great functionalities. The other big thing in 2013 that's different is the web-based experience. No more Silverlight client, right? It's a web plugin now for them to do voice and video through the PC back to my system, which means they don't need admin rights to their box, which they needed with Silverlight. Right? So we've now streamlined and made that much more efficient in how we can bring people into our organization. That Skype Federation is big. And I don't actually have a slide on this because it's so new, I literally didn't get a chance to build it in yet, is J-Lync or Java Lync. So there's a Java-based API Lync interaction that can now be encoded on your website. If you think about the, hey, would you like to chat with an agent type functionality from your website, you can now embed that type of functionality through this Java-based API, and it's called J-Lync. So if you want to do some research on the side, that's what you want to look at. This was the Lync conference was the first time I had really heard about J-Lync, and it is fairly new, and I think it's still a little ways away, still a few months away, but it is something they were demoing and showing off in a working format. So it's not that far off. We'll have this capability of doing a web-based reach for reaching out to our customers and our colleagues. So now we transition and just talk quickly about the cloud. And I get asked a lot about Office 365 in the cloud and Lync in the cloud and sort of where it's going and how it compares and contrasts with on-premise. So when we talk about Office 365, I just want to set the table. I struggle a lot when dealing with customers because Office 365 is not a product. Office 365 is a marketing name and a bundle of products. That bundle includes Lync, SharePoint, Exchange, and Office, right? Those are the components that make up Office 365. So Lync is nothing more than hosted Office 360, hosted Lync. Okay? When we talk about Lync in the cloud, there are a couple of different scenarios that don't work and a couple that do. So the biggest thing with Lync in the cloud is no integration. By that I mean you cannot do a SIP trunk to an existing PBX, say, or to a Polycom RMX bridge, or any of the other services or systems that are out there. Because when you subscribe to Lync in the cloud, you're housed in one of 10 data centers in the US. You don't know, and your data is replicated across 3 to 5 of them. So up to 6 data centers are holding your instance. Which 6 are they? You don't know, and to be honest, you don't care because it just works. But when we're talking about integration, if you had to do a SIP trunk, a SIP connection back to your existing on-premise PBX, then that would not be possible because you would have to run 10 SIP trunks to 10 different data centers because you don't know which ones you're in. And now if you multiply that across the number of customers Microsoft has, you can see how quickly this becomes unmanageable. You can't, it doesn't scale. Is it technically feasible? Sure. It's just not scalable and it doesn't work on that grand scale. So integration to on-premise based systems through a SIP trunk doesn't work. Now that said, it will still integrate with Exchange if you're running Exchange on-premise, or if you're running SharePoint on-premise, that integration will work fine, right? It's that SIP trunk connection that's not going to work. Now, there is talk of Lync becoming a hosted PBX where Microsoft is going to bring their own SIP trunks into their data centers and allow people to subscribe to Lync as a hosted PBX. And that still is on the roadmap coming up in the next 12 to 24 months, where we are going to hit that point. But today, the safe thought is if you want to do enterprise telephony or PBX functionality, or you want to integrate into your existing telephony or video-based systems, you need to keep Lync on-premise. If you are truly looking for IAM and presence and federation with your colleagues, Lync hosted in the cloud can work for you. So again, that's really the inflection point for on-premise in the cloud. So again, why do we move to the cloud? It's the same reason we do with everything. We're looking for that uptime assurance, and we're looking for efficiency, right? We want to get it up and running. We want to get up and running quick. We don't want to have to manage it, and we want it always on. Now, one of the things that has changed is what used to be called a hybrid deployment. And I thought I had gotten rid of it in most of the slides here, but hybrid got deprecated. So hybrid was the methodology of deploying Lync on-premise, connecting it just like an Exchange hybrid environment with the cloud, and homing some of your users in the cloud and homing some of your users on-premise, or homing all of your users in the cloud and utilizing your on-premise Lync deployment simply for the telephony piece. And this made sense except for 2 fundamental flaws. The minute we start doing enterprise telephony on-premise, we immediately start looking at doing high availability and disaster recovery, because now we're doing voice. And we can't have a single point of failure in our voice system. We don't want one. So the minute you're going to go through the expense, time, and energy of creating a highly available, recoverable on-premise deployment, well, you've now just done this, right? You've already achieved that and put all that time and energy into. So now are you going to add the additional energy of then connecting that to the cloud, adding that extra maintenance, thereby removing efficiency and having to manage 2 full environments, right? It didn't make sense. When you started to crunch the math and start to crunch the numbers and time and energy, it didn't work. There were a handful of customers who ever actually did it. And it was usually only those on a very grand scale. 60, 70, 80,000 seat deployments where there was an existing telephony system and it was only a subset of people who were maybe using Lync Voice. So that hybrid deployment methodology went away. Now we can still do what's called split domain, where we are hosting some users in the cloud and hosting others on-prem, and they function like one environment. And however, those users in the cloud have no access to enterprise telephony or voice or integration, right? There's no pass-through. So they share the same namespace, but they are not, the functionality doesn't cross over at all. Those in the cloud are limited like everybody else in the cloud, and those on-prem have full functionality like those on-prem. So again, that crossover there is again the biggest thing to think of. So now when we talk about modern operations, we've looked at this a lot. Again, from an Office 365 standpoint, you can manage everything in the cloud. You can manage it through PowerShell. You can manage your whole environment exactly as you do on-premise. The key is you're reducing your operating costs because now you're not maintaining those VMs. You're not patching the server. That's really what you're paying for when we talk about that migration to the cloud. And again, there is a new integrated admin console up in Office 365 so that you can do all of the same types of administration you would need to do. Of course, what's missing from the cloud is all the voice features, right? So all of the stuff around enterprise telephony is missing. Again, key feature change of 2013 is PowerShell. For those of us who have spent a lot of time writing scripts over the years, we can access our Office 365 through PowerShell and run our scripts to do those things we want to do if we don't want to use the GUI. We do have some reporting that's available in Office 365. Again, when we talk about all this reporting, a lot of it again is around usage, number of IMs, basically adoption, because we're not going to really be looking at too much of the telephony. The other thing to note here from a monitoring standpoint, or sort of when we're talking about this voice and video, again, when you go to Office 365, your data is going to stay resident inside the US. So all your services, if you sign up with a US-based address, all your services are going to be based here in the US. If you have employees in Europe or Asia Pac, for voice and video, their packets are still going to bounce all the way back here to the US data centers and bounce all the way back to them. In the case of most of Europe, this is not a problem. In the case of Asia Pac or some countries with infrastructure challenges, we'll see a lot of latency on those packets. So two users in Hong Kong or two users in Japan, where they're going to be connecting with each other, and they may be across the hall from each other doing a video call or one floor to another, their packets are bouncing all the way back here to the US before they reach the person across from them. It's not very efficient, and we generally will see some choppiness and some latency. And this is where we start to look at maybe doing an on-prem deployment instead of a cloud-based deployment. And again, so, I think we talked about remote PowerShell. I think I kind of beat that to death. So understand you do have full access to your remote PowerShell. So with that, just over an hour here, I want to thank you for your time. I do want to open it up to questions and answers. We got through it pretty quick today. We normally book an hour and a half for this, but there weren't a ton of questions as we stepped through today, so kind of let me just sort of roll through. If you have questions, again, please put them in the IM window to the side right now, and I'll be happy to address them. So the question is, Lync 2013 compatible with Office 2010? Yes, so two different parts there. The Lync 2010 client, part of Office 2010, will connect to a Lync 2013 backend, right? You won't get some of those cool new features that exist in the Lync 2013 client, but you will get the capabilities of doing IM presence, voice and video, and all of those wonderful things. The presence indicators will show up in your Outlook for Office 2010. There is a hotfix or a little update for 2010 to connect it to 2013, particularly if it's in Office 365. There's a few patches. If you have 2007, some things may work, but it's not really supported. You have to be on a certain service pack, and there's a whole bunch of caveats of what doesn't work and things like that. We definitely recommend you start looking at the client, because there were some really cool updates to the 2013 client. Things, from a user perspective that we didn't focus on today, like tabbed IMs. Again, in Office 2010, the persistent chat doesn't work in the 2010 Lync client. It's still a separate persistent chat client. Therefore, if you're doing persistent chat rooms, you would need it, but in 2013 you wouldn't. And some different features and functions like that. Still going to do active speaker cam, not the gallery view. So some different features of 2010 that are there. Will it work? Is it compatible and supported? Absolutely, right? And Microsoft's MO has always been 2 versions back, right? So 2007 is technically supported, but there's a bunch of caveats, and from a practicality standpoint, most of the time we'll advise you to move off of it just because it will lead to bad user experience, right? There'll be things that don't work or things that don't work well and we don't like. So while technically supported, we'll at least insist you move up to 2010. So the next question, can you create call groups with various users? Absolutely. So Lync is capable of doing team ring or call groups or hunt groups where it will do round robin. Now, I happen to have a background in call centers and doing a lot of work with call centers. I would not call it call center grade. There are ISV add-ins, just like for reporting, there are ISV add-ins for call center grade functionality. As someone who's done a lot of work with call centers, there are some very particular features when someone says the term call center that trigger off in my head. But when we're talking about basic call groups or hunt groups, round robin, things like that, absolutely those are capable of, you have an IT support group, and when someone calls into the IT support number, I want all 5 or 10 help desk phones to ring. Absolutely, no problem. That can absolutely be done without a concern. What you might find lacking is, I want to do automated server-based call recording for scoring on those calls. Man, that doesn't exist in Lync. That we would have to do the ISV add-in. Or I want to weight people, right? I want to do skills-based weighting. So those types of advanced call center features, right, desire to use or skill level, that doesn't exist in the call group. It's a simple, I'm going to ring them all, or I'm going to do round robin, or I'm not. Can you report off those calls? How many calls did each user take, wait time, etc.? So how many calls did each user take? Yes, that you can pull out of the SQL database. Wait time? No, it's not a call queue. It's not an IVR or an ACD. Right? It's not on that level. Again, that's where the ISV add-ins, and there's a bunch of them out there. Interactive intelligence is the one I probably favor the most and I have the most experience with, but there's ZCOM and there are others out there that that work with Lync, and you would use Lync as the telephony front end, but you would use something like interactive intelligence to do automated ACD IVR, speech recognition, right? So instead of, hit 2 to get the call center, say what you want, those types of, those type of cues and things, that's all what I call call center grade functionality. If you compare it to Cisco, right, you can buy a Cisco telephony system, and if you want call center, you buy call manager. Same with Lync. If you want a telephony system, you buy Lync, and if you want the call center piece to come with it, you buy interactive intelligence and plug it into it. There's University in Texas, very large one, that's a 20,000 seat Lync deployment, and we deployed 250 agents on interactive intelligence for their call center, primarily the sports group, but also several other groups in and around campus. So you have functionality like that where you can look at that call center grade functionality. So depending on your need, we can look at that. And depending on features and functions and cost, right? Call centers are traditionally not cheap, right? And if you look out and you go out and price out any of the call center platforms out there, right? Aspect or any of them, call centers aren't cheap because usually it's a subset of users. I just responded to an RFP that was about 600-700 users, but was about an 86-person call center. Call center, the Lync deployment itself, all up for phones and everything, was in the 200,000 range, which is very inexpensive for a PBX. The call center was another 200,000 on top of that for 86 agents. Granted, 86 agents is a good number of agents for that size company, but call center functionality is not cheap, whether it's Cisco, Interactive, Avaya's, whomever's. Call center licenses are not cheap, and that's where a lot of the cost comes in. The complexity is fairly easy. It's a fairly simple added. In the case of i3, it's 2 servers, and it's only 2 because we want redundancy, because we don't want your call center to go down. So it's not an overly complex architecture. It's just the license cost per agent is, a call center license will cost anywhere from $500 to $1,500 depending on the platform you're buying and what features and functions it has. Definitely something we can go down the road with you on through a planning engagement, though. Again, basic call center need, basic team ring, hunt ring, basic functionality. Lync can handle it in-house. If not, then you need to step up to the call center grade level of Lync, right, and those ISVs. Last call for questions. If you have any other questions, please type them in. Okay, we got one more coming in here. So, question, what's the minimum configuration for Lync if we want to do a pilot for the server side? Depends on what you want to do a pilot on. If the pilot is for IM and presence only, it's a single server, that's it. When you're done. If we're talking about enterprise voice, from a pilot standpoint, you can still do it with a pretty minimal server configuration. You're just going to do it slightly different. For a pilot, as an example, we would build an enterprise pool. We would build a single SQL backend database and a single edge server. So that'd be 3 components. If you wanted to test the conference calls features, such as sharing a SharePoint, PowerPoint presentation, we would probably put in the WAC server role as well for that functionality. So now you're talking about 4 servers sort of total for that pilot. Now, a production system, we may go in and add more later, right? You've got single points of failure everywhere. We're not running a SQL mirror. We're not running any of that functionality, but we've at least got it stood up and you can begin piloting it. So again, I use the term production pilot versus a true pilot. A true pilot's a teardown system. I'll give you some VHDs and we'll spin something up and they're on my licenses, and we'll put them up in your environment for a couple of days for you to do something. We can do something like that for a pilot if it's a teardown. If it's a production pilot, you're 80%, 90% confident you're going to do Lync. You just got to put it through its paces before you fully commit. That's when we do a production pilot like I just described, doing that single server, even though we're building it in an enterprise pool. So that way when the pilot's done, we can take it to its next level, right? We can take that production pilot and turn it into a production system by adding in those additional server roles instead of tearing it down and rebuilding it. So it all depends on where you're at. And I found most companies, they're 90% on the way to Lync already. So it's the production pilot tends to be the more favorable direction, but that's up to you and cost, right? A teardown pilot is obviously going to be much cheaper than a production pilot. So anywhere from 1 to 4 to a full deployment, depending on your level. And we can definitely talk with you about that offline if you're interested. Okay, with that, I want to thank you all for attending today's webinar. I hope you got something useful out of today. We will follow up with you just to get feedback and elicit feedback on the webinar today. We have a lot more webinars and live events coming up, so definitely check out newsignature.com on the events section to see what we have coming up in your area, either for live events or future webinars. I thank you all for giving me the last hour and 15 minutes of your life, and have a great day.